Welcome to the Hard Truth About B2B E-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, with episode 97. Unfortunately, Tim was not able to make it, but he'll certainly be back for the next episode. So I'm going to have to neglect kind of the shout outs that he normally does, but let's give a quick pause for the sponsors, and then we'll get into it.
Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance.
All right, welcome back. And I'm super excited to introduce Jason Greenwood, who recently moved to my hemisphere, or our hemisphere in North America, although a different country. And you've been in the agency e-commerce, B2B e-commerce world for a long time. I've been seeing you on social media forever, and I'm just excited that I finally got a chance to talk to you after, I don't know, years of seeing your posts. So tell people who you are. So.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Thank you so much for having me, Isaiah. And same, I've been seeing a ton of your content. You're very active on social. We basically met through LinkedIn, and we've had lots of good conversations. I think we've commented on each other's posts for a couple of years now. So I definitely see you moving and shaking in the space. So really, really cool to finally be able to chat, digitally face to face. Look, I've been in the e-commerce space for over 20 years now. I think I'm coming up on my 23rd year this year. And most of that time was spent in the APAC region, based out of New Zealand. And that's where I built my career, was in the APAC and ANZ regions in particular. I've had my own e-commerce pure play. I've worked agency side. I've worked for some of the biggest brands in the ANZ region as, managing e-commerce for them. And then a couple of years ago, decided to go out and go completely on my own. Started my own e-commerce consultancy. We're a little bit different than a lot of consultancies that are out there in that we don't just focus on e-commerce. We consult across people, process, tech, and data. And you'll notice that tech is not the first thing that we consult on. Oftentimes, people and process and data, and more often than not, data is actually the first challenge that we encounter when we get with these with these clients. And we consult across the whole commerce stack. So it's not just e-com, ERP, CRM, CDP, PIM, the whole stack, POS, system integration, the whole piece. And that's what
I just want to interject. I think that's the only way to really truly help, transform these companies, right? Yeah.
Well, usually when I get in there, oftentimes I'm brought in because they think they need maybe a replatform of e-commerce, or maybe they're going into e-commerce for the first time or something like that. And then once we get under the bonnet, once we get under the hood, we realize there's a whole lot of other things we kind of need to deal with and address first before they can adopt digital channels effectively and implement digital channels effectively. And that's what I've been doing for the last, over 2 years. 3 months ago, we decided to make the move from New Zealand to Mexico, my wife and I and our dog. And we're absolutely loving it, loving the weather, loving the culture, the food. The opportunities in Mexico are amazing. Mexico's growing at a ridiculously fast clip. They didn't close during COVID. They kept their borders open right throughout. And so they're
I remember I was there a little bit.
It was crazy. Like the Mexican economy absolutely exploded during COVID because it was one of the only places in the world you could travel during COVID. And
nearshore developments, you get some of that. There's so many other nearshore manufacturing. I think it's a huge opportunity for a country.
And a very, very young working age population, much younger than the States and Australia, New Zealand, and everywhere else. So it's a very young country. And so, they're doing really, really well. No country's perfect, and Mexico has its issues, but the peso's on an absolute tear. Tesla's going to build a big gigafactory here. It's a hub. Mexico is, a lot of people don't know this, it's a hub of both automotive and aerospace manufacturing as well. So huge aerospace industry here, based out of Querétaro primarily, which is about three hours away from Mexico City, 3.5 hours away from Mexico City. So it's a cool place to be. It's a very dynamic place to be.
Yeah, I kind of joke. I mean, I know there's, people talk about people crossing the border. I think at some point, I don't know if the arbitrage is going to be worth the squeeze. There might be so many good jobs in Mexico. They should be,
heading back together. Well, I tell you, the number of people in Mexico from North America, from the States and from Canada exploded during COVID. And I think the estimates now are something like 1.8 million Americans or something like that are living in Mexico now. So it's a pretty significant population, and it's growing fast.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell us about, kind of what got you into B2B e-commerce and the lens that you're looking at, and, kind of that summary of where you think the industry is at. I mean, I know we talked about kind of like how it's hard to even have honest opinions in this industry because of various reasons that we'll get into, right? So
yeah, look, I guess like any industry, e-commerce is political it's a political beast in many respects, because you've got people trying to put on conferences, and then they've got vendors there, or maybe they've got agencies there. And so therefore, if you disagree with that technology, or you don't necessarily think it's the best for every situation, and you voice that opinion into the market, you can kind of, it can feel like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, in the sense that maybe you won't get invited to speak at conferences, or maybe you won't get invited to partner with a technology or partner with an agency. It is very political. And so, for someone like me that pretty much has always and built a career on speaking my mind pretty bluntly, it can definitely be challenging. Don't get me wrong. I pride myself on being as honest and transparent and truthful and unbiased as I can. We've all got inherent biases, I think, based on experiences we've had with technologies or technology leaders, favorite stacks we've got experience with. I think we all have biases, whether we like it or not, but I try to be as neutral as I can, particularly in my consulting, because what works for one client won't work for another client. What works for that client won't work for another client. And so you've really got to be really seen as being very neutral, particularly as a consultant. You just don't really have a choice but to be seen as neutral, because if you're seen as backing a horse to the detriment of your clients, that's the quickest way to kill your consulting business. That's
I think that's the problem in this industry, is that the vendors are all going to promote their solution as the solution that's going to, like you said, these people, B2B commerce, I think, is just so complex. And that's why we started this podcast. And usually what they think the problem is not actually the core problem. It could be their ERP is outdated and the data is a mess. Slapping on a nice new shiny front end isn't going to fix kind of a mess on the back end, right? And so, I think, the vendors are out there kind of selling their point solution as the solution, and of course they're gonna kind of overpromise to get the deal, and then let the services people deal with the headache after that. And then the services people, we have to kind of play the political game of some of them maybe only work with one platform and they're biased, or they work with a few, and they still have to be careful and try and keep everybody happy, and we deal with that. So yeah, I think it's really tough for clients to fight through the noise, and that's why we have this podcast, right? Because where do they go for honest information, right? Like, you can go for some review sites, and you can try and hire consultants, but it's pretty rare, I'd say, to find a consultant like yourself that, which is why I'm so excited to have you, that can think about the whole stack and how it really all works together. Because a lot of times what we see is like, if the ERP is the core data set, but we can't get any information in real time to the front end or present it to the customer, like that's an issue, right? It's gonna be hard to do a good B2B e-commerce site unless you're willing to say that, the e-com site is going to be the master data set,
Well, you wouldn't want that, I don't think, in B2B or D2C or B2C for that matter. I think that, maybe when you're first starting out, you're very, very small, and you're not popcorn that's popped yet. But that leads nicely, I guess, into why I decided to really focus very heavily in my consultancy on B2B. It was because, selfishly, there was already a ton of competition in the B2C consultancy space. It was very red ocean, very competitive. Lots of people out there making lots of noise about how they were going to transform your business and make you an extra $100 million a year or something stupid like that. So I really saw that with my background and my experience, both agency side, merchant side, and then also having consulted throughout my agency life to lots of very big, very complex B2B brands and how they were either going to implement, e-commerce for the first time, or significantly step up their e-commerce game, or significantly increase automation and integration capability within the business, or, order management workflows, et cetera. Because I had that background, I guess I felt super comfortable having those really difficult discussions with B2B merchants, and coming in and being able to act as a positive disruptor to their ways of thinking, maybe about the way that they've always done business, and say, well, look, sure, that's maybe how B2B purchasing was done historically, but that's increasingly not how B2B buying is going to be done in the future, or at least it's going to be digitally enabled and it's going to be digitally augmented.
So can we
and
talk
and
about,
I'm having
let's get in.
go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think it's so important. And the last few episodes that will be released soon, we actually talk about that, and that the narrative is shifting. I think, I'm sure, like 5 years ago, or when, it was, people kind of were like a little skeptical, and, some maybe were more on board than others, but I feel like we're seeing more even board level executives go, we got to do this, right? But then the enablement and actually making it happen is the hard part, right? Like, just because you want to do it isn't always enough. And I don't know if you're seeing that same thing, where you're seeing a little bit more, appetite to want to do this, at least at the top level. And that's what we're seeing. So,
yeah. And I think you cannot have successful projects and programs of work and ultimately successful outcomes if you only have buy-in, say, for example, at the sales team level, or the CFO level, or the e-com level.
The CEO doesn't believe in it. It's like, the executives don't believe.
You're screwed. At the end of the day, you'll never have the long-term commitment to those channels, and the investment and the internal resourcing and bandwidth allocated to those channels that are required to see them be a success. And particularly if you don't bring salespeople on the journey with you, oftentimes e-com can be seen as a threat to their business and their way of life and their commissions and everything else. That can also be a challenge. And so oftentimes some of the first discussions I'm having when I go into these businesses is talking to the sales team and talking to the leadership and the sales teams, and really helping them get over that internal hurdle or that internal resistance to implementing e-commerce channels. And I'm not just talking about e-com in isolation, basically digital channels full stop, whether that be EDI, punch out, e-commerce, digital, B2B marketplaces, all the additional B2B channels that businesses can implement from a digital perspective. Those are the channels that we're having these very difficult discussions with in some of these businesses. And oftentimes it's not up to me necessarily, because I don't believe in selling to the unsellable. So if I have to go in and I have to convince a business that digital channels make sense for them, that's not what I'm there for. Or if I have to go in and try to justify my existence as a B2B consultant in their business, I'm not interested in that. But I am there to help paint an accurate picture of what that opportunity looks like, what kind of effort is going to be required to execute on those opportunities, what types of resources they're going to need to allocate to see projects, programs of work, and ultimately those channels be successful in the medium and long term. And then how we can work through the process of encouraging adoption by our customers of those digital channels once we build them. And so those are the types of discussions that I'm having very, very early on when I'm typically brought in to talk about, okay, what does this look like for our business, or what could this look like for our business?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's really like, it's not worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to try and, convince everyone that they need to do B2B commerce. But I do think the tide is changing, that, more of these companies, frankly, are getting bought by private equity. Private equity is not stupid. They need to make their money back, and they're going to invest in digital channels. Marketplaces are taking off. There's even these new B2B marketplaces. And I think a multi-channel approach is generally correct, right? It's fine to have people go pick up stuff at the warehouse, or, you can have buy online, pick up in store. You can have marketplaces. You can be on marketplaces. You can build your own, e-com site. I think all of the above, or some combination, is the correct answer. I think the problem is companies just kind of they haven't thought through the channel mix that's appropriate for the future. Right? Should we be 20% on marketplaces, maybe 30% on our own website? Look, maybe you do still get some phone orders and email orders, but if your whole business is, hey, we're just going to take phone and email and that's it, like, I just don't see how that's a viable future for any of these B2B companies within the next 5-10 years, right? Or even less, right? I mean, if you're not seriously trying to figure out how to get more digital transactions, I have a hard time seeing how some of these businesses will succeed, because probably someone else will figure it out and get their cost of order down, right? And if you can get your cost of order down, it's a pretty big competitive advantage, you know?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, for a lot of these B2B businesses, it's not even so much, you know, phone, email, carrier pigeon, fax, whatever. And surprisingly, some of these businesses still use faxes, which just blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that field sales is really where I see the friction, right? So a lot of these B2B businesses, in fact, almost all of them that I deal with, will have some form of field sales force, even if it's a completely remote AE, you know, account executive type of sales force, but they will have some form of sales team, sales reps, SDRs, SDMs, BDRs, BDMs, whatever. And so it is oftentimes the initial resistance comes from those teams to digital channels. But the moment you know, I've said this on other podcasts, on my own podcast and everything, but I think it really is so important for these businesses, if they don't do it already, because a lot of the B2B businesses that I go into, they don't track what percentage of a sales rep's time is spent on certain business functions. So they don't track what's spent on outbound prospecting. They don't track what's spent on account management. They don't track what's spent on admin. They kind of just say, well, this is the bucket of time that this person spends doing their job.
For the salesperson's not 24/7, and you know, maybe procurement needs to make an order at 8 p.m. and they go to a competitor that they can, you know, buy online for, you know, right? So there's another, you know, but I agree that those are more important, I would say, which is all those hidden costs to dealing with, you know, sales.
Well, if you don't know what they are, how can you make an effective business case? So for example, if you're tracking in a CRM or in a time management tool or whatever, if you're tracking what your sales reps are spending their time on, and if it works out, and in all the businesses that I know that actually track that time, somewhere between 25 and maybe upwards of 60% of their time is spent on admin tasks, just admin, purely admin, internally. Getting an email from a customer with a spreadsheet attached with their order, and then they've got to go and manually punch it into an ERP system for fulfillment. They spend a lot of time on admin, a tremendous amount of time on admin. If we can decrease that by half or 75%, then most salespeople are going to be a hell of a lot more happy doing the stuff they love, which is going out and talking to customers.
My guess is also some of the smaller deals they're losing money on. So, you know, $1,000 or less order, you know, for especially a distributor, the margin might only be $200 or $300, or, you know, could be even less, right? And then the sales reps time, the admin time, you know, they had to go meet you know, there's probably you probably could do
vehicle costs, you know, mileage, travel costs, you know, staying in hotels, all that stuff. It has a cost associated with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes these B2B businesses, because it's kind of the way it's always been done, they don't look at that. They look at that as a sunk cost. They look at it as, oh, we have to do that. That is just
there's no other way.
There's no other way. Exactly.
Yeah. Can you give an example, or do you have any success stories of where you've kind of shown the other way and you started to flip the script and maybe the admin costs went down, or there's some numbers to back any of that up? Or
yeah, look, I with most of my clients, their admin time for sales would drop by about 50% once they implement e-commerce channels. That's kind of a pretty good target average that I see pretty routinely, and it makes the sales teams happier. They actually enjoy their job.
What do you advise the sales team do? Like, they enable the customers online, they get them comfortable buying online. Like, how do you think the sales reps should approach this?
Well, I think you have to take them on the journey, the customer, that is. You have to pick some cohorts right from the beginning, right when you're starting to scope a project, even before you've built anything. Because the salespeople hold the relationship with the customer. So what I would do, and what I've seen work well, is they will pick a cohort of customers that they think will be super resistant to buying online, and that they think will never be able to convert them. And then they'll grab another cohort of their customers that they think, hey, they're already gagging. They're already asking us for digital channels. They're already asking us to be able to buy through e-commerce. And I think you pick a two of those small cohorts, and you get them in the room, whether it's physically or virtually, with you, the sales team, the leadership team, the consultants, whoever it might be, and you have a dialogue with them, and you say, look, okay, why do you purchase through these channels today? Why do you like purchasing in person and through sales rep? Is there any opportunity, or do you see any opportunity to make your business more efficient if we implemented the digital channel, and vice versa? What kind of experience do you expect for the cohort that is gagging for it and already asking for digital sales channels? What type of experience are you actually looking for? Here's what we're thinking. Here's our short list of functionality that we think must be in our digital experience. But is there anything we're missing? Is there anything we're overlooking? Is there anything you expect or want out of this experience that we're not even thinking of yet? How can we help make your business more efficient from a purchasing and procurement perspective?
The sales reps become the most important feedback loop to the changes and the features, right? That's
and helping to hold their hand. Once you've done that, and once you've sort of got that feedback initially, once you've done the initial architecture, and then what I suggest also is that once you get into UAT, that you bring those two cohorts back in, and you say, okay, we're gonna hopefully stand alongside you and sit alongside you, let you effectively beta test the solution before it goes live, poke holes in it, find out what doesn't work for you, see what's not as seamless as you expect it to be, give us the feedback, and we can fix it before we ever go live with the solution. And then once you actually go live, I think having the salespeople literally physically sit alongside customers, hold their hand for the first 1, 2, 3 orders, however long it takes, to show them the benefits of using that experience and helping them see the value to their business. That is because the worst thing in our world, right, is to engineer the most amazing Ferrari of a B2B solution and then nobody uses it. They go out and they spend 200, 300, 400,000, whatever it is, and then it doesn't get used. That's going to cause people to lose jobs, right?
Yeah.
And we don't want that. And so I think by getting people on board from day one and then post live, I think it's important.
Let's talk about the two. I don't know if you saw my post a couple of days ago, but I think there's kind of like two paths to ROI for B2B commerce. And I've seen both work. And one, actually, I saw a company that it's unbelievable. I hope we're in the proposal process, and I hope we get to work with them, because in 2 years they went from 0 to 5 million followers online, and they have manufacturing distribution, and they started their D2C line. I think over time we're going to help them bring some of the B2B into that, for the larger orders. But I think that B2B in general at a high level has kind of two options, right? They can, to get ROI in the short term, and you could kind of get value from both, but I think you really have to say this is the focus of the project, and the other part is maybe secondary or phase 2, phase 3, and it's either doing what you're saying, which is really converting the buying behavior from offline or sales reps or EDI, whatever it is, EDI, phone, fax, to online, getting that admin cost down, getting more data. Like, you're basically shifting the channel from other channels to your own owned digital infrastructure. And the ROI there is pretty simple to measure, right? Adoption, speed to order, like, all the things we can get more into that. The other is, kind of going almost like more of a D2C wholesale model, where, you kind of maybe even roll something out quicker, faster. It's maybe more of a trendy brand. It could even be a different brand, a different name, in some cases. And you're kind of trying to capture the long tail, the $500 orders that maybe are neglected because they really are better fit for e-commerce than, it's almost like D2C or wholesale. You might get some larger orders, and then over time that could kind of grow into the bigger ones. But I think I think I've seen a lot of people come to me for that, and they're like, yeah, we want, we get all these sub $1,000 orders, or 5,000. It's a lot of times it's under $5,000. We want to bring it all online. Want to make a separate brand. It's a separate thing. But then they have no plan for marketing, and they don't really want to put any real money behind it. And in my opinion, that is a very marketing heavy strategy. And if you're not going to go heavy on marketing and brand and
direct customer acquisition,
customer acquisition, it's going to fail. And I think that step one is even figuring out which one of the two you're trying to do and understanding what's behind that. And after you figure that out, it's important to understand that probably the first version, which is converting customers, I'd say is more of a technical project. And the other one is really almost more of a marketing brand project. And that's where I see a lot of failure, because these B2B companies they're they're not usually great at brand and marketing. It's not their core business, competitive advantage. So
Look, I get a lot of the same questions, and they're like, hey, should we establish a D2C channel, and should that be our first foray into e-commerce because it seems like it's a whole lot easier and all that sort of stuff. And my advice 9 times out of 10, or probably 99% of the time, is no, let's do B2B e-com first as an additional sales channel for your traditional B2B business, because that's a business model and you understand. You're used to shipping out cartons, pallets, and containers. You're used to, giving custom price lists. You're used to giving custom catalogs. You're used to setting MOQs. You're used to fulfillment on that scale. You're used to customer service on that scale. You're used to managing returns on that scale. You're used to you're used to having an augmented B2B business model. You're already used to that, right? And so why would we then, as the first foray into e-commerce, why would we dump you into a business model that you have no experience in? Why would we dump you into a model where you now have to bring in a whole bunch of new internal resources just to run and manage that channel
agency,
and give it even a
ad spend, branding, everything. Yeah, I mean,
all those capabilities that you just don't have today? Why would we force that upon you with a very, very high likelihood of failure and a very low likelihood of ROI anytime soon, when we could plot a pathway to that? Sure, maybe that's a 2 to 3 year plan down the track, but let's get you guys upskilled on e-commerce in its most basic form that aligns with your existing business model. Let's do that first. Let's start building up some internal institutional knowledge and capability around e-com, maybe even bring in some additional resources into the business. Then once you're really comfortable and we've got the systems and the system integrations in place, we've got the integrations with the ERP, maybe we've got integration with PIM, maybe we have integration with POS, maybe whatever all the integrations we have to be able to allow you to run your businesses seamlessly and as automated as possible. Once we've got that in place, then adding, say, a D2C channel or a small wholesale channel on top of that becomes it's not a bridge too far. Like if we want to make the jump from A to Z, which is really what a B2B business is doing no e-com today and has no experience, if they want to go straight to D2C and be successful with that, that's like an A to Z jump. If they want to go,
that was like a very outlier guy that like somehow crushed it with this company. That is not the normal.
That's not the norm. It's not the norm.
That guy, I'm like, I gotta go work for this guy.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Like he's whatever they were able to do in 2 years is unbelievable, right? And and I think that's generally going to fail. I would agree. There's edge cases. Maybe they just are really passionate about marketing and they have the right leader, someone that wants to run that, and they're going to use it as long tail to maybe get some bigger B2B customers that also funnel through that. I think there's a path where it could work. But I generally agree, especially for someone on the larger, like mid to larger scale, like if you're doing over, let's say 25 million in B2B sales, it's highly likely that, like you said, 95% chance that it makes sense to just double down on making that better, right? And if your average order value is over, a few $1,000, make it a better experience, right? Add purchase order on the website or terms and conditions or balance, or, I'm sure. I don't know if you're familiar with Balance, like the new kind of B2B.
Yeah. I've had them on my podcast. They're good guys, and they're especially enabling B2B payments on marketplaces, which is a really important facet of fintech that's been overlooked for a really long time. So I'm really glad they're doing that. I think that brands can also take a bit of a hybrid approach, right? They can say, okay, we're gonna implement B2B ecom because that's what we know. We know B2B, and we're gonna try to migrate customers from legacy, in-person sales, at least for replenishment ordering. We're going to try to encourage all replenishment ordering to go through e-commerce channels. But then what we're going to do is we're going to take that one step further, and we're going to use our B2B website as a customer acquisition channel for B2B. So instead of just having purely a portal that basically until you log in, you can't see prices, you can't see the catalog, you can't purchase whatever, which is how most B2B brands start out. They start out with effectively a portalized experience where you have to log in to be able to see anything. I think the new model of B2B is to say, well, we'll do that, but we'll also have the ability to create a B2B account on the front end initially, We'll see maybe a subset of our catalog. We'll see the highest price that we charge, that we have available across our catalog. That's the default trade price that any new B2B customer would get at a bare minimum. And then what we're going to do is we're only going to allow them to pay via business credit card at checkout. They're not going to be able to be on account when they first sign up through the website, et cetera, et cetera. And then that becomes a lead gen for those leads to be pushed to the sales team. So the sales team can open a dialogue with those new customers and say, hey, we saw you came and bought through our B2B website. Thanks for joining. Thanks for signing up. Hey, we'd love to have a dialogue with you around the types of things that you need, maybe things that we don't carry yet that would be useful to you. We'd love to talk about putting you on an account with terms.
Real sales,
do proper sales, right? With the schmoozing and the level of support and love and customer service that goes along with that. And then you turn those from a small, effectively test order type of B2B customer into possibly a whale if you do it right, and if they have the potential for that. And I think that's kind of more the new model of B2B, where yes, replenishment ordering is part of phase one, but very soon, either part of phase one or a very fast follow phase two is to use the website as an acquisition channel for new B2B customers as well.
I agree. Because to look at it as like phase one is let's get some value out of converting offline to online, helping the sales rep, fast follow, now you have this infrastructure, maybe add request a quote. You know how like there's the request a quote tool on like BigCommerce, B2B edition, Magento's had that for a while.
Yep.
So that you kind of add to cart a quote, things like that can generate new business, even as a guest user, right? And so I agree. I totally agree. And right. And then you're kind of like quickly moving into the value of which I think some of these guys kind of overlook how hard the marketing is and trying to do this like marketing only project where they build this little D2C site that really just ends up kind of being a dud, right?
And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because if you don't have the capability and you don't have the skill and you don't have the bandwidth in-house, it's not the freaking field of dreams anymore. Internet, maybe, and it really was never the field of dreams. But I know when I first started out in the industry many, many years ago, it was far, far easier to just stand up an e-commerce website and start generating sales straight away. But now every single vertical industry and market is packed with very well-established competition. There's very, very little white space in the industry that hasn't already been attacked by a very successful D2C or B2C player. And you're going into the lion's den, and you are going to have some serious chops and capability as a business in that D2C space to even have a shit show chance of competing with established competitors. Why would I do that when I could soft pedal into that space as opposed to jump in with both feet and have a super high chance of failure?
There's a case we made for like manufacturers, right? Where they can gain market share because they manufacture the product and they're losing a lot of arbitrage through all the middle management layers of distribution. So that I think is a bit of an outlier case. But especially for distributors, let's talk about distributors, because I think distributors are very much at risk of major disruption and losing their businesses. Honestly, it's a little, I don't want to be too sensational, but I think it's kind of important that people wake up and say, look, if I don't start changing and adapting, private equity's already rolling them up, they're already modernizing them. Manufacturers are going direct to consumer. You could be irrelevant.
Well, or direct B2B. The manufacturers are also doing direct B2B, which cutting out the channel.
I have a small brand that is cutting out their distributors because they're so frustrated working with the distributors and they feel like they're archaic. They built they have a D2C site and a pro site, and the pro site is working, and they build direct relationships with their customers on the B2B side, and it's just way better, honestly.
Yeah. And
so what do you think is the future of distributors, and how, am I being too, is it right to kind of be like, look, you should be scared if you're not taking this change seriously. Am I right to be saying that, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, look, I think wholesale distribution, that layer. So if we think of manufacturers at the top, we think of wholesale distribution in the middle, and then we think of either resellers or end consumer of B2B products at the bottom of that sort of tiered channel model. If we think of the wholesale distribution layer as the equivalent of the reseller layer or the retail layer in D2C land, if we think of those as being the equivalents, which I think they are, I think wholesale distribution has a very important role to play in terms of product aggregation, right? So, but that alone used to be the value prop. So you had have a wholesale distributor in a country, for example, and they would be bringing in products from, say, 10 manufacturers.
Yeah, I can go and say, I get all my supplies from you, and I don't have to go to 20 different manufacturers, and that's a value prop, right?
Correct. And so that has always been
and
the historical value prop.
And, some lower pricing, and
Well, and also local stockholding. That has been the other thing that wholesale distribution has brought to the table in terms of value prop. It's product aggregation and manufacturer product aggregation. It has been local distribution, local warehousing and distribution, and local support. And along with that local support comes local reverse logistics in case of product failure, returns, et cetera, and product support.
Maybe some
services
also,
and customer service and all that sort of stuff. So I think that wholesale distribution has a massively important part to play in the traditional supply chain. But to your point, I think they're in danger of being put out of business by very, very smart manufacturers that are going direct to the B2B customer, that's the end user B2B customer, or the B2B customer that is then a reseller into the market, into the retail market of those
marketplace,
right? D2C resellers, basically.
Yeah.
And so I think that that middle layer, I call it the fat middle, where they've been able to arbitrage by having monopolies on distribution in a given region or country. So oftentimes, like in a small country like New Zealand or Australia, oftentimes a manufacturer will only have one distributor of that product. Especially in New Zealand, smaller and they've got a total monopoly on that. And so there's just no way you can break into that market. But I think that manufacturers are seeing the risk of having those exclusive relationships in that they can't even go direct to their B2B customer if they've got a distribution agreement in place. And so those forever distribution agreements are becoming the exception rather than the rule nowadays, because manufacturers don't want to paint themselves into a corner and limit their channel mix possibilities for the future.
So reliant on the quality of that distributor, and
if the distributor has the monopoly, what incentive do they have to be good? They have zero incentive to be good.
It's the opposite of the distribution business model in general, which is competition and trying to get lower prices for people, and
totally, it's the antithesis. It's basically, it incentivizes shitty behavior.
So what do you think they should be doing? What do you think what I mean, besides some of the things we talked about, should they be embracing these marketplaces? How should they work with the manufacturers to not get cut out, or what would your advice be?
Well, I think I think they are going to have to compete in the same sense that, remember how we had that one-to-one mapping from into the D2C world, where they're selling directly to the end customer in the D2C world. I think that wholesale distribution has to bring so much value to both the manufacturer and the B2B customer. I think they have to add so much value in that value chain that they become indispensable, right? That they continue to be that indispensable link between the manufacturer and the B2B buyer. Whether that B2B buyer then on sells, or whether that B2B buyer consumes that product. I'm thinking of, say, for example, stationery. The end consumer is the B2B buyer. It might be an office that buys stationery from the distributor, and then they use that in their business, as opposed to then that being on sold to a stationary retailer or whatever the case may be. So I think that the wholesale distribution still has a very, very important, they can become that one-stop shop. They can become the one-stop shop for the product. They can become a one-stop shop for the product education and the product material. They can add tremendous amount of value, because manufacturers, 9 times out of 10, manufacturers provide really shitty product information, like really shitty. So I think distributors, by owning product photography, owning product descriptions, owning product attributes, owning product collateral, owning PDFs, owning imagery, owning product videos, owning all that piece, where they can add so much value for the B2B buyer of that product, whether it's now they need to distribute that information. or whether they need that information to be able to make an effective buying decision. The reality is, if they were buying directly off the manufacturer, oftentimes the manufacturer has less information and less product knowledge than the wholesale distributor does, because the wholesale distributor is the one that's actually selling it to the consumer of the product, and they see what the returns are like. They have more information about new product development that they can give back to the manufacturer. And that's the other value that they add. They are boots on the ground. They are getting product feedback directly from the channel that should be funneled directly back to the manufacturer. Oh, we see a return rate of 20% on this product. There's clearly something wrong. Mr. Manufacturer, you need to go in and do some new product engineering on this thing. You need to fix it. Or, hey, Mr. Manufacturer, we're getting feedback that this product is awesome, but if you tweaked it just this little thing, or you added this one additional feature, it would add 50% more value, and they would pay 25% more for the product if it had this one additional feature.
A real value-added reseller to the manufacturer, especially. Yeah, product feedback,
completely,
data analytics. But honestly, a lot of that could be better supported with e-commerce, right?
well, and if we think about that as just another channel for the wholesale distributor, absolutely, because they should really already have this information that they're disseminating via either a print catalog and sales field reps today. They should already be doing all this stuff, but most of them are not. But the positive thing about implementing digital channels in e-commerce is the fact now that a lot of product information is originating digitally. So to convert it into analog is a very difficult process. So if we go digital to digital, they can create a production workflow in terms of product information and product management. They can do that in a much more streamlined and efficient way than they could ever do from an analog perspective and sending things off to printers, et cetera. So I think that digital channels not only are important because of the way the customer wants to buy, but also in terms of bringing efficiency to the business and speed to the business, it's massively beneficial.
And data and analytics and yeah, all these things. Yeah,
totally.
So tell me a little bit about the, change gears here, the platforms that you think are, most interesting on the B2B e-commerce side. We mentioned Balance. We've got a relationship with them on the payments. But what's the evolution been like from what you've seen? I think a lot of these platforms kind of didn't really start out in B2B, and they've all kind of pivoted towards it. But what I find interesting is some of these platforms that were maybe B2B first, I think they still might lose because the ecosystem is so important that the ones that started in B2C and built the ecosystem, Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, they might win from just sheer size of ecosystem, So what are your thoughts on kind of the B2B commerce ecosystem and the platform?
Look, it's still quite a bit of if I'm honest and I'm just blunt, I think that the platforms that started out as B2C, D2C and have tried to bolt on B2B functionality after the fact, they've had fits and starts, meaning they've seen measures of success. If we think of Shopify, let's start at the top. Let's start with Shopify, okay? They're not a B2B commerce platform. They're just not. Even their wholesale channel is complete rubbish. I would never recommend that to anyone. They've got some pretty good apps and extensions available out in the marketplace, SparkLayer and a few others that add some pretty solid B2B functionality on top of native Shopify. But you're still then dependent on two separate vendors, two sets of API endpoints to integrate with. You are, even though the UX is pretty seamless in terms of both the storefront and the checkout and everything else is pretty seamless, it's a pretty heavy lift for businesses to get onto those platforms, because you not only have to adopt Shopify, you have to adopt all the supplementary technology.
Well, yeah, I think I totally agree. I think Shopify is never really, and I think they kind of know that they've been behind on B2B, but they did launch also company accounts and price lists. What do you think about their attempt at bringing some of it in natively? Do you think it's working, or it's going to work, or have you done anything with that yet?
Yeah, look, I've looked at it, and for most B2B merchants, it's just not enough. It's a start. It's a dipping the toe in the water, but it's not enough. And I think that any serious B2B brand would never consider Shopify. I think if you're a D2C brand today and you you want to start dabbling and tasting maybe a little bit of B2B, maybe some tiered pricing, maybe a little bit of volume pricing for customers that are sort of repeat customers.
Really more like wholesale, right?
Like establishing, like dipping your toes in the water of a bit of a wholesale channel, then that could be a great place to maybe just do some beta testing effectively of what the market might look like for you and really low lift scenario where you just say, well, here's a pricing tier, this wholesale channel gets 25% off across the board and everybody can access everything from the whole catalog with no MOQs or nothing. Then I think that could potentially work as a tester, as a beta test. But I actually think that the vast majority of merchants that want to dip their toes in the water of B2B without establishing a proper B2B channel should just try to start selling on a B2B marketplace. Just like I tell, D2C brands that want to start selling in a new region or a new market or with a new category of products, don't go out and build a $200,000 bloody state-of-the-art D2C website just to trial a new market. Go and sell, on a marketplace, a local marketplace, and validate the market first. I would say that the same holds true for B2B. But if a brand is really serious about the B2B channel, you have to be looking at platforms that have much more comprehensive out-of-the-box
So
B2B
what are those
functionality.
platforms in your mind right now?
Look, I think BigCommerce is getting there. Do I think they're there yet? No, I don't. Look, I'm a BigCommerce partner, and I recommend their platform a ton. And I work with their platform a ton. And they absolutely have their place in the market. I think that it's been a challenge, just frankly. I think it's been a challenge for them to absorb Bundle B2B and B2B Ninja into the business.
They're working on it. I think they'll get there, but
they will absolutely get there. But man, it's a big beast of a job because each of those three pieces of technology were built out using very, very different underlying tech, right? Underlying languages and underlying database and everything else. And their underlying API layer is quite different, although now that's slowly being rolled into Google Cloud, which is what B2B, BigCommerce is hosted on. And so I have hope that within the next, 12 to 18 months, that we'll have completely unified endpoints. They'll all be native B2B, BigCommerce endpoints. They've just finished rolling the teams together. So now, instead of having a separate Bundle B2B team and a separate BC team, the Bundle B2B team now is sitting underneath the BC banner. And even from a customer support perspective,
it's definitely better, right? And they're getting there, and they're getting there.
But are they there yet? No. I've been pretty blunt with BigCommerce themselves about where I think they can improve on that. Both from a consultancy perspective and a vendor.
Yeah, I appreciate that they're very willing to listen to feedback, and I think that's one of the things I love about them is that partners like you and me can have direct conversations with leadership, even maybe the CEO. It's really hard to have those conversations with other platforms, at our, where
they're very humble. Let's put it this way: the team is far more humble than what you often see in the industry, and they're willing to take channel feedback, and I think that's super important.
That's why I think they're going to get there. That's why I think they're going to pick. Yeah,
totally agree. And I wouldn't necessarily say the same about Shopify. I mean, they're the 800-pound gorilla, and I don't think I would ever use humility and Shopify in the same sentence. So it's quite a different beast when you're trying to talk to the Shopify team, right? Then we have platforms.
What do you mean? It's perfect. You could scale to $1 billion on B2B. Yeah,
I know, right? Yeah, oh God, we could talk for hours about that, but. I think VTEX has a real shot at it. They've been B2B, B2C, and marketplace and order management from day dot. And so they've had really solid B2B functionality from day dot. And I think as a SaaS platform, they're really, really impressive. I think Adobe Commerce, they just so confuse me. I spent many, many, many years in the Magento ecosystem, and that's where I actually started my industry experience was in the Magento. I cut my teeth
I think a lot
on the
of
Magento ecosystem, and oh my God, it's just Adobe just has a million irons in the fire. That's the reality, and they're trying to go SaaS across almost their entire stack, and Magento is like that on-prem thorn in their side where it kind of has to be re-engineered from the ground up.
SaaS, right?
It's just not built for SaaS, and they're pushing AEM as the headless front end to go with the Magento back end. And look, Magento has some pretty impressive B2B features, but it hasn't really, it's kind of stagnated quite a lot over the last couple of years. I don't think they've introduced anything truly innovative in quite a long time. No. And I see the bulk of my business, to be frank, is migrations off of Magento to SaaS platforms. That's a huge chunk of my business.
Where are you seeing them going to? BigCommerce, Shopify?
BigCommerce primarily. BigCommerce would be the number one platform that I see them migrating to because BigCommerce, fortunately, is a more open platform, from a, I guess, both from a headless perspective, from a integration perspective. It's more open than Shopify. It's got higher bandwidth APIs. It's got more fully featured API endpoints, except for there's a couple of key areas where Shopify still beats them, from an API perspective, but that gap is closing bloody fast. I think multi-storefront is a pretty impressive new feature from BigCom. I think multi-location inventory and warehousing, I think I think it should still be in beta, but it's not. I think that's going to be an impressive new feature once it's the bugs are ironed out in that. I think, the one area where I still think Shopify from a D2C perspective has their advantage is pause. I think that natively integrated pause is a nice feature, but once you get over about 2 physical locations, their location
POS,
management
right?
falls,
In the US, POS,
point of sale system, and I think that their location management limitations and their order routing and management function.
If you don't use it, if you don't use their POS, it's kind of like tough, right? Like,
it becomes a real challenge. And I have a lot of B2B merchants that I work with that do have physical locations too.
I personally think we're going to see a major consolidation of the e-com platforms, right? I mean, it's so hard to support all the use cases and be competitive. I think Adobe Commerce and Magento will survive. They'll incrementally get better, and they'll slowly kind of make it more SaaS. And I think it'll have its place, but probably much more upmarket. Right. The days of the $5 million company on Magento are long gone. I would say at best, you probably have to be doing over 25 million as a business to even seriously consider it. Like really more 25 to 50 is like the lower range of what I would say is like, someone that should even be thinking about Magento. I mean, I think VTEX, the problem is, brand recognition, they're just not really well known outside of South America. It's going to be tough, right? And so I think really besides Salesforce, Adobe, Magento, BigCommerce, and Shopify, it's really hard to make a strong case for the other platforms because you need the apps, you need the community, you need you need
developers, you need advocates.
And so, all these guys are kind of fighting from the scraps, but interest rates aren't 0% anymore. Are they really gonna be there in 5 years or 10 years in any meaningful way?
Well, I've actually been surprised that BigCommerce wasn't bought by private equity already. I'm stunned actually. At their low valuation.
I really hope they don't. I mean, I think it's a strong possibility, and we'll see. I mean, they're inching towards profitability, but they're not quite there yet.
Yeah. And look, they've done a RIF recently, and that'll help them get there hopefully a little bit quicker. They're forecasting, I think, early 2024, hopefully being profitable. So, if they can find a path to profitability that doesn't completely gut the ecosystem, then I think, and doesn't gut their support levels and doesn't completely gut product innovation, then I think they'll be fine. But to your point, I think it's a dogfight out there from a platform perspective. I've recently come on board as a minor investor and a head of GTM for Mikata, which is a completely SMB focused wholesale platform. You can almost think of it as like the Shopify of B2B. And, I saw that as a massive gap in the market. And that's why I aligned with these guys. I started out as just a pure consultant to their business. But then I decided, man, I see what these guys are doing, and I think it's pretty special. And what they're building is very special. I don't see anything out there in the space like it. And I need to become more tightly aligned with these guys because in my business as a consultant, most of my clients would start at, say, the $20 million GMV roughly per year. 20 to say $100 million a year would be the kind of clients
offline, just to be clear, right? Because they're B2B and it's not.
And they're either completely offline today and don't have e-commerce, or they have done e-commerce but done it really badly and kind of ignored it and left it in a corner for a few years, and they're really ready to level up. But I think on the smallest end of town, meaning 20 million GMV or less, or say 50K to 10 million a year GMV for a B2B business that is 100% manual today. There's just no great B2B platform out there for them, and that's what we wanted to build for.
Too small for an ERP. I mean,
exactly. And they 9 times out of 10 they don't have an ERP. They've got Xero, or they got QuickBooks running their business.
Yeah, we see a lot of QuickBooks, right, in some of these smaller B2B companies, right? So yeah, it's an interesting space, and I think Shopify will have some opportunity there. I think BigCommerce will hopefully solve some of those issues. But you're right. I mean, it's a tough decision, right? Because you got to do something. You can't just be like, we're gonna
Can't just sit on the fence forever.
Yeah. And so your options really, really generally kind of come down. And obviously there's outliers and there's maybe some niche reasons to go with a niche player, but come down to Adobe Commerce, Magento, BigCommerce, maybe Shopify, wholesale. And, I think there's still some sort of case for Salesforce B2B. They have like their B2B version, but
yeah.
But
which was an acquired product as well. That was
they're kind of bought into this really expensive Salesforce ecosystem, and who knows where that's going to go. I think they're going through a lot of evolution and kind of pain right now in terms of re-engineering their core products. So there's really no golden option.
There's no silver bullet.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet, and you really got to kind of weigh the pros and cons and know that you are going into any of these projects with some cons. And all these platforms have some significant cons that you're going to have to overcome. And if you just think that it's going to, it's
gonna be all rosy, you're gonna plug it in and you're gonna convert all your customers to e-com. It's not realistic. But I think that the major handbrake for most B2B businesses today is not so much the tech. I think we're at a place where mature enough. It's not perfect, no. But I think we're mature enough in the B2B e-com ecosystem now, and bringing in some tools that were traditionally thought of as D2C, B2C tools. For example, PIM systems. For example, CDPs. For example, marketing automation. For example, customer service automation. There's certain things that we can kind of import from D2C, B2C land and integrate those into a really solid B2C, B2B solution architecture that get us pretty far along the path. And realistically, these businesses need to take a stepping stone approach to B2B anyway. And so, especially if it's their first time doing B2B e-com, the solutions are there, I think, to get them pretty far down the track with a high level of confidence that they're going to get ROI pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely there are limitations to the technology, but the people and the process and the data is probably a bigger limiting factor than the technology right now.
Couldn't agree more.
And even then they stifle technology because they get caught up on one feature. It's this one feature we can't do. It's like, all right, just launch without that feature. You probably are fine without that feature, right? And deal with it later, build it over time. I think a lot of people also in this B2B world get really caught up on the waterfall fixed bid mindset, where it has to be this one big project and it has to be this set cost. And it's just not the world that this is. You need to think of this as a capital expense that's probably an annual budget, that's part of your IT budget, marketing budget, and it's really a mix of probably both. And you got to budget for it on an annual basis, not the first project lift might be a little more. It could probably go down for a little bit after, but you really probably should funnel some of that into marketing after, or feature improvements after. So I don't think it should go down that much, and so, yeah, it's tough, right? It's like this massive change management, digital transformation thing going on. And I don't think we've quite seen the retail apocalypse, the Toys R Us going out of business. But I don't know. I don't know if we're that far away from that. I think that we could see some of that in the next 3 to 5 years. What do you think about that level of disruption happening?
Yeah, well, look, I think in the short term, I think the debt discussion, the debt ceiling in the United States is a big discussion to be having right now. Every country in the world shot themselves in the foot with COVID, and they're paying what do they say? You sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind.
Not Mexico.
Not Mexico. Yeah, I think almost every other country really struggled, and they're really struggling to recover from that, and sky high inflation, and war in Ukraine, and a whole bunch of other things. So I think the micro picture, the short term picture is pretty hazy. But I think if we look at the trend, right, and that's the only thing you can look at, you have to look at the long term trend, and the long term trend. Sure, even in the D2C, B2C e-commerce space, we're returning much more to the pre-COVID uptrend, which instead of going like this, now it's It's just tracking upwards, and we're returning back to that pre-COVID upward trend.
But
but it's still
gonna keep going up.
It's still up and to the right, and it's going to be the exact same uptrend in B2B e-commerce. It is going to be up, and it is going to be to the right. So if we want to make sure that we're on the right side of the trend, they say don't fight the trend. That's a saying in investing, and I say the same thing about e-commerce. Don't fight the trend, because you will lose. And the trend is up and to the right in terms of e-commerce adoption. And I think if we can continue to play the part of the enablers, whether it's you from the agency side, whether it's me from the consulting side, whether it's the vendors continuing to pour money, time, and effort into enablement and capabilities in their platform, and also bringing the price down to make sure that it remains accessible to as broad a base of customers as possible. I think we're going to get there. And I think it really takes thought leaders like you having the fortitude and the desire to put their time and their energy into educating people that may never, ever, ever be customers. And that's what I'm trying to do, because I believe that a rising tide floats all boats. So I think if we can educate the market and we can make everybody better, if we can help everybody execute at a higher level, then what that means is we actually end up making the pie itself bigger. The opportunity becomes bigger. And if we're good at what we do, we'll always get our share. We'll always get a fair share of the pie.
Will get better. Our clients will be better. Phase 1 will be more like phase 2 instead of, phase 0 or phase 1, 0.5. Right. So I totally agree. And that's why I'm so, I want there to be more honest information in the market. And I think a lot of that is stifled by these, exclusive partnerships or this fear to kind of like speak out about the truth about the fact that what you just said is it's a dogfight in B2B e-commerce right there. There really is no like silver bullet platform. And I do feel pretty strongly that, you got to have a very serious conviction if you don't go with one of the big players that, what you're doing. If you go with like a non-big commerce or non-Magento or not, and I think that's something that people need to take seriously. Did I lose you? Are you still there?
I think, I just had the guys. No, I'm back. Are you okay? You can hear me?
Yeah. You just froze for a second. Yep, you're good. It might have been me actually.
Sorry about that. sorry about that. Yeah, I'm back. Look, I think there's a case to be made for in very specific, very niche verticals. A generalist e-commerce platform doesn't always work, or the cost and complexity to adapt it is so high that it's probably not worth it. I mean, I just had the guys from Gen Alpha on the podcast, and they have built over the last decade, they have built a dedicated B2B e-commerce platform specifically for the automotive and heavy equipment industries, and everything about their solution is completely tailored to that.
I think I had those guys on my podcast. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. And so I think, I think for specific use cases, it absolutely makes sense to explore vertical specific solutions. But you're right. I think in the lion's share of situations, going with a mainstream generalist platform that is then both configured and customized for your specific niche and your specific vertical, I think that's the better way to go with the lion's share.
You got to be really smart about if you're that 10% or that 20% use case where that other option is right. You got to be, that is not a decision made on a whim. You got to be really smart about why you're making that decision. Right.
And that's where people like you and me come in. Hopefully we can hopefully, because merchants, sometimes they don't even know where to start, right? When they begin their journey of search and select for both partner and technology, they don't even know where to begin. They don't even know the questions to ask to help prevent them from getting burnt. They don't know the commercial questions to ask. They don't know the technical or functional questions to ask. They don't even know how to draft their own BRD, their own business requirements document. They don't even know how to arrive at what their right.
I'll give you a perfect example. As I talked to someone that, we did some outreach and we had a conversation around e-commerce, and turns out they're on kind of the legacy version of the ERP that we don't know until we talk to them. And that version is probably not where they're going to want to stay. And it's pretty clear to me they need to make a big change, right? They need to either upgrade to the modern version of that same ERP or go to a whole new ERP. And frankly, I was like, look, like I think you need to figure this decision out before I can help you, because, and I'm not the ERP consultant. So I gave him some names and I said, go do some research. Here are the names of, and the things that we know, but I'm not the expert. in all the ERPs. And I don't think that, in some of that kind of situation that needs to do a major ERP migration probably isn't going to benefit, from picking an e-com platform that might not be the right platform until we know what the ERP is, right? And then
Correct.
Change how we consider the integration. Some of the integrations are more pre-built for different platforms. So we take that into account, because if you're on ERP XYZ, we might have a good product for a certain e-com platform that might save a giant chunk of work, but that might not work for a different there's this kind of mix and match play that, and sometimes you can't really make those decisions until you have the foundation set, right? And so I think it's on us consultants to let people know, like, you might not even be ready for this. Like, you got to fix your house first. Right. And there's a way to parallel path, but that can be risky if you jump the gun on one of the paths. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, when I go in and the back office is a shambles and it's just not where it needs to be, 99% of the time, again, even if I'm brought in for a quote unquote e-commerce front end project, oftentimes it turns into a business system project first. Then we get the business system sorted. We get the data sorted in those business systems. Then we can start thinking about digital channels.
I might make this intro because, we do some of that, but we really like to stay in our lane of like just making great e-com experiences and strategies and marketing around that. And so, we don't go that deep in that world like you do. So, you might get an intro from me because I'm all, I want these people to get objective opinions and many different good opinions. We are running out of time. I definitely would love to have you back. How can people find you, learn about kind of this new solution you're building, kind of the last remarks that you have? So
yeah, cool. Look, probably the easiest place to find me is LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Jason Greenwood on LinkedIn. You'll find me straight away. I try to put out as much content as I can on LinkedIn on a regular basis. They can find my podcast. It's just called the eCommerce Edge Podcast. They can find that on any podcast engine. And then, Mikata, if they're a small wholesale business doing, say, less than 10, $20 million a year in GMV, they can go to Mikata, mikata.cloud, or just reach out to me and I can put you in contact with the guys over at Mikata. And look, I'm loving life. It's a great, we're so lucky, man. We're really lucky. We're lucky that we're in an industry that continues to grow regardless of the economy. We're lucky that we can do what we do mostly remotely. I'm lucky that I get to be a digital nomad in Mexico. We're privileged. We're super privileged. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to play a small part in this industry for over 20 years. And yeah, I'm just doing my best to try to send the ladder back down through my content and trying to help as many people as I can. If they go to my website, greenwoodconsulting.net, I offer free mentorship through my website. They can sign up for my free mentorship program directly through my website. So yeah, just reach out to me anywhere. I'm on every social platform, so reach out to me anywhere is great.
That's awesome. I really hope to have you back, and we'll definitely be in touch. So you've been awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaiah. I really appreciate your time. Look, I think you guys are doing some good work, and yeah, hopefully, you're obviously successful. So we're both very lucky.
Thank you. Yeah, you got to remember where you came from, right? Like, you kind of reach these new goals, and you're like, oh, you have a little setback, but there was a time where things were really tough when we started,
Well, there was a time when where we are today was where we wanted to get to, right?
Yeah. And then you hit it and you're like, well, this is the next goal, right? It's easy. That's why more money doesn't always make people happy, right?
100% right.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.